Worm is a web serial by J.C. McCrae, also known as Wildbow. You can read Worm in its original format by visiting parahumans.wordpress.com or donate to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. This story isn't intended for young or sensitive readers. Readers who are on the lookout for trigger warnings are advised to give Worm a pass. For a complete list, check the description for all of Worm's trigger warnings.
Take that, you worms. Welcome back to another episode of Dissecting Worm with myself, Jacob, and Allan joining me as always.
Hello, hello.
And also joining us as always, Michael.
Hey.
Making us sound good. Keeping us in check. Gentlemen, we are in Arc 21.
Crazy.
Another slow arc. I'm going to keep it real with everyone listening. We were chatting briefly before we hit the record button. There's not a lot here. There's not much. So we've got some thoughts. I've got a few thoughts surrounding the season as a whole that I think we can sprinkle in here. But it's a bit of a as Gandalf would say, the deep breath before the plunge.
Yes.
We've got some killer arcs coming up here. Next couple are going to be pretty crazy. So it's a little bit slower here for a couple weeks. Would you agree, Allan?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I feel like this season is actually going to have, a really interesting, us plotting out stuff and, picking the vibe, picking the transitions. Cause we're about to hit the transition from sort of villain to hero. And I feel like that should be the majority of the show. I think the tone we should be going for the season is kind of what we need to focus on. Like, how do we show the impact of all the previous seasons coming to a head at the beginning of this season?
I like that.
I mean, this is the episode that shows it off more than any of the others. But
yeah. I think it's going to be a bit of a trickier season for us to nail down. Not so much in terms of like where it begins and ends, but like what's the through line this season, right? I think you're on the right track for sure. I think kind of nailing that transition is going to be key for this season, and seeing how that plays out. That's one thing we haven't really talked about a ton, especially in our season recaps, where good seasons of television have arcs, season arcs within the season, right? Good episodes of television have episodic arcs within the episodes. And we haven't focused too much on that, one, because thankfully Wildbow is a pretty damn good writer, and he tends to do that himself. So as we kind of adapt arcs, they're sort of built in already. But definitely on the season front, something that's going to be, I think, a bit trickier here for the next few arcs.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel like if we're going to just talk quickly, the other seasons, I mean, season 1 is, I don't know, maybe just I don't know what you would call it singularly, what we said before, but in my mind, it's like making choices almost. Season 2 is like survival. Season 3 is, I'm trying to think of what season 3 would be.
Well, even in like just simpler terms, if you're looking just from Taylor's arc as the overarching arc of the entire series. Season 1 would be her decision to essentially become a villain. Not in her words, not so blatantly, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Season 2 is life as a villain. Season 3 is ascending from villain to supervillain. And then season 4 theoretically is a pretty big tonal shift for Taylor as a character, where it's this shift away from villainy towards like a pursuit of redemption almost.
Yeah, I mean, in another sense, it's. I'm thinking about this in like how you would see it for like artists, where like, man, I did everything I could do as a villain, but I'm not feeling fulfilled in that. So I'm
Right.
no longer going to be a pop artist. I'm going to become a painter.
It's the midlife crisis of villainy.
Yeah, kind of like you're right. She has reached supervillain status, and there's this thought placed in her head where, where does she see herself in 5 years?
Yep.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What does the future look like for you? And for her, it's always, in short term, we've been talking about, oh, it's about making Brockton Bay better. Oh, it's about rescuing Dinah. She did that. She got what she wanted. She did those things. And now she's like, what's the future? She's like, oh, 5 years? Well, the world ends. And maybe that should take a priority now that the other thing, the more immediate, food and shelter has been taken care of. Maybe we can focus on big picture things. And she makes the calculation, which we'll, talk about next time, which is like, where do I go to do the most good? It's the same utilitarian, mindset that she, like choice that she justified her, going to the Undersiders and working with them for so long.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. 100%.
Honestly, it's you. The way you're talking about it, I couldn't help but think of Megamind. Brilliant, one of my favorite movies of all time. And just after he's won everything and defeated Metro Man, and he's just walking around the city aimless because there's nothing else for him to do. He's feeling so blankly, as he puts it, which is I see Taylor here.
Yes.
What's left?
100%.
No, well, I want to talk more about the overall season, but I guess let's get into arc 21, kind of go through it. It's not going to take us too long here, and kind of just note a few things about the arc itself that may or may not adapt well. I love the little moments in this arc. I love her chat at her mother's grave, little things like that. The what's the word I'm thinking of? Evolution of her relationship with Rachel being so evident, and how easily for Rachel, how easily Rachel allows Taylor to take a dog, things like that. A lot of moments in this arc that I would certainly want to make sure we include in any sort of adaptation that are really nice character moments.
Perfect already.
Yeah. And then we get to, honestly, this is where it gets tricky, because honestly, in my adaptation mind, the fight with Valifor and the fight with the Teeth, those are on the chopping block, but could very easily remain in if we need filler fights of any kind, So it's like, it's tricky. I don't think they pace too well for where the story's at. At least not any sort of focal point, But it's hard. I like the fights.
I mean, the Valifor fight moves exactly as fast as you think it does in terms of, oh, they do it, they trick him, do it, and then they gouge out his eyes. Like, really, it is unlike the Teeth, which is, it's actually its own fight. The interaction with Valfor is just the vehicle for hanging out with Regent and Imp.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right. So you can keep that. You can drop that in anywhere, pretty much.
yeah. It's so fast. It doesn't even have to really be a thing. The teeth fight, you can play out as the same way where, we kick off the episode and they're cleaning up the last of the ABB. Like, yeah, they're finishing up this one group of heroes. Oh, well. And that's it. I think the big thing here is if you really wanted to make sure that the audience felt the tension and felt that there is something drastic coming, you play it exactly as is. You don't have any interludes. You don't cut away. You just keep having Taylor go to the next area. And it's a very oddly calm, waiting for the other shoe to drop episode. And the episode ends with the other shoe dropping.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. I think the only thing I'd want would be probably in the previous episode as well, assuming this is episode 2-ish. Is that there's just a bit more foreshadowing of what's to come. I do think even reading it does come a bit out of the blue. Her decision to leave. It's not like totally unexpected or it feels incredibly out of character or anything like that, but it does happen like relatively quickly. At least with the pace of how everything's been going. So I think a little bit of just some type of foreshadowing in the first episode of the season, for example. Just, I don't know, I'm not kind of just spitballing here, but just little things that we would need just to help sort of sell this moment. You don't want it to get lost. You don't want people to be like, oh, what's this tactic? She's obviously not surrendering. That's crazy. Things like that. Which is fine if there's a little bit of that, but you don't want it to be that jarring to where you're going to lose the audience,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if you put, between the first and second episode is, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'll get my head straight because thinking about this. Yeah. Now, the first episode starts with her getting outed, right? So we kick off the season with that, and then and we should, like, the feel is definitely she gets outed as a result of her actions, and the conversations she has with like Accord, which is kind of what starts this. And I think having her meet with I think she meet with Accord the first time when she's not outed or when she's outed. I forget. I think it's after she's outed.
I think it's afterwards.
I think we have her meet beforehand with him and we have her. I guess we could do it afterwards, after she's been outed. Like, sort of his final scene, like, he basically is the final thing. Says, like, hey, what are you doing? Basically asks the question to the audience. Where do you see this going? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then she goes and, she goes home and does the butterfly with her dad. And, and she just, is pondering that question. Where am I going with this now that I've been outed? Now that I've, disconnected from my dad? The city is essentially safe. We kind of need to play that up, and Accord, of course, gives his binder over to have the plan thing. I think he gives that over then, like, hey, take a look at this. Nobody does, but whatever. And she looks at it, and this whole episode is her looking at the file, asking herself that question, reaping the consequences of all the things that we've got before, just like the last episode, and ultimately coming to the conclusion, I need to be focused on the end of the world, Brockton Bay is safe. That was my goal. Brockton Bay has Lisa. Brockton Bay has a Cord. Honestly, I think we should kind of play up a Cord a little bit of a nicer bad guy, like, because we're not in his head. You just have him get really irritated with people, but ultimately
Right.
have his thing. Like, she looks at us, she's like, is this your power? Is your power like solving the world's problems? And he's like, yes, and nobody ever fucking listens. And have her be like, well, shit, like, you and I should have talked years ago.
Right. Here's the keys to the city.
Yeah.
Get it done.
But no, I think that's exactly how it goes. It's like, hey, if you and Tattletale can get along, you're gonna fucking just be great for the city,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even she gives him assignments. She's like, can you adjust your thing to make sure that, like, the ferry is operational, obviously, because that's
Right.
that's all she ever wanted. Was her dad's, union dream to get up and going. And he's like, yeah, like, I think I could make concessions to that. I could make that part of the direction I use my power. And they do that. And then she's like, cool. I mean, you guys have the city, like, all this is taken care of. And then she goes on her little spree of, like, essentially saying, are you guys going to be good without me? Without saying that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like to kind of build off of that. I like the idea of maybe the first couple episodes here really highlight that Taylor won. Coil is dead. The EBB and the Pure and Empire 88, like, they're all gone essentially. They've been defeated, and what's left are thugs, right? Like, Alifor is a thug. The Teeth are thugs. They're not organized. And so I think if we demonstrate both of that, like how easy it is for Taylor and the Undersiders to defend the city at this point from actual, like, evil villains, and then the arrival of Accord and things like this, where it's, like a higher class of villain essentially picking up where Taylor left off, just ruling with purpose, to kind of protect everything, and really highlight that Taylor feels like, hey, my work here is done. Like, we did it. Now, like you said, now the city's safe. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room. We've got the end of the world is counting down. Time for the next step. I like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's good.
I mean, you could even have her basically be like Lisa, just like everything else, Lisa very much knows where Taylor's head is at. But I don't think everybody else does. So have her be like, hey, what about the end of the world? And all of them kind of be dismissive of that. And they're like, are you worried about it? And she's like, I mean, kind of, yeah. And they're like, yeah, well, just don't worry about it.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. But she gonna worry about it.
Oh, if there's one thing Taylor's going to do, it's worry about it.
It's gonna worry about the end of the world, which, I mean, fair. Probably a good idea. Really like Taylor's scenes with Lisa and all of those moments. Really great scene. Yeah, these little quiet moments. I really like the way Wildbow builds up to her surrender in this arc.
Yeah.
It's a good build. I like it. I'm just imagining there's a lot of, like, obviously we're getting like Hans Zimmer or Michael Giacchino's composing this. Obviously, we have the
Oh, yeah.
budget.
Of course.
And just some beautiful, dramatic, slow building, melancholy music going right now. Just slow little montage of her moments with her friends. Says goodbye.
Yeah.
Move on out. Lovely.
Yep.
Yeah, and scene.
And scene. To kind of touch on, we've had so many, like, great comments on all of our posts these past few months, and we never get the chance to, like, address them as they're being posted, because we record several episodes in advance. A little sneak peek behind the curtain there, but for Michael's sake, we have to have a little bit of a buffer. But it does mean that we're normally like way past recording when I really want to address something somebody said. But I did just want to jump back because I forget who the commenter was, and I apologize, but you know who you were. Thank you. It's talked about how ending season 3 with this moment, with the surrender, and actually going post Echidna into these next two arcs, and ending on the I surrender as the season finale, which I admit goes pretty hard. But I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were on that. I like where we split everything, but it's kind of fun to think about in terms of just
are you
that
saying like, okay, so Echidna, they, she either does it at the reveal, that the PRT is essentially falling apart because you have her, because I kind of like, in my head, I envision the idea of all the heroes are bickering, yada yada yada. She flies away all the way to the actual PRT building, and then strolls in and goes like, I surrender to all of the unpowered people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Like, the sons
that would
of
be the
bitches are over
idea.
there.
Yeah, like kind of the epilogue. Echidna's defeated. Everything, the mess is dialing down, and from there you kind of skip most of these 2 arcs, and you just kind of do the bits at the end of arc 21, the chat with Tattletale, who kind of knows what's up, chat with the Cord or whatever, and then she goes to the PRT offices and surrender, and that's where you end it. That's what I'm imagining it would be. Kind of do it all in the same episode.
I mean, if we're doing with the Coil, like I stick with, Coil goes, we keep Dinah around for numbers to defeat Dinah, or to defeat Echidna. And then at the end of this, she goes back, she picks up Dinah, she drops her off at the house, and then she turns herself in. Or she and Dinah stroll into the PRT office together.
Yeah, something like that could work too.
Yeah, because this could be, Dinah and her could have the conversation, cut ties, I'm sorry, not be a note, just be a, sort of a thing that she sits down and is like, I'm going to have a conversation with Dinah. And Dinah, her and her have the conversation. And she goes like, Dinah, it's the tell me about Dinah conversation. But in this case, it's Dinah, tell me about the end of the world. And she's like, what's the, essentially like, what's the best outcome? Where do I go? And she's like, you're not going to like it. And we just cut to her walking Dinah into the PRT office, and Dinah going like, that's when Dinah kind of would just mouths, I'm sorry. And, Taylor, nods and accepts it, and then gets, arrested.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's
I
like,
think
and then she goes, whatever it takes.
Right.
It'll be worth it if this works out.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun to think about.
Or if this is the only way, there we go.
Essentially.
Or if this improves our chances, something,
right.
Yeah.
Something
catchy line, and then they tackle her.
Yeah. It's fun to think about. I think at the end of the day it would be a bit too much. And I think it would distract from the ending with Coil. And I do like the idea of ending on a bit of a victory for this season. But I do think it would work. I think that would work well. I think you could do that. And just sort of approach this whole season 4 a bit differently. But it's kind of fun to think about. A few different ways you can do things.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to think of where else you would even put this. Because it would be so hard to do the outing, and then this, like, before all of that, unless she didn't get outed,
Yeah, I think if you're moving the surrender a bit, then you're kind of skipping over the whole school scene, or a similar scene where she's outed.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I get. I'm not opposed to that. Although I do like the scene.
Yeah, I like the scene too. It's not the only reason I would change stuff is if it didn't flow well. And
Yeah.
to be fair, it is difficult, but this isn't like an absolutely impossible situation to like. I think
No.
they go with the episode. I think it is a little awkward. But I think they think this is a way lesser of an awkward problem than like Coil is.
No, yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's just a matter of selling the tone shift, which is way easier said than done, especially
Yeah.
4 seasons into a show.
I mean, the first 2, let's just say we do 1 episode per each of these because I think that's okay. I think that these are very post Taylor getting outed, like in the the scenes following that in the end of the episode. It's a very somber tone. And coming into this entire episode equally somber because it's dread. Like, things have happened. These are all the consequences, and these consequences are, hitting you on every level. The big thing is, people know the identity. She can't go home. She can't be with her dad. Honestly, the mundane takes the bigger hit here. And I think that's what makes it hurt more is like, oh yeah, she can't go out and, do anything now. She's, the only thing she gets to do is villain. And,
Right.
And she, that's what she's always been doing. It's what she feels, like she's good at. She's kind of tried to ignore the Taylor life almost. But then you kind of miss it when it's gone. And she's like, I think just showing off all the ways in which she is now, not only is this sort of sad and somber, but it's also it's trapped. She's trapped.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that she wasn't going to do this anyway, but now she feels trapped by the situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so much of it will be set tone-wise with like the good soundtrack, like Jacob was saying.
Oh, it looks so good in my mind. I wish I could just take the visual and just create it on film.
Yes.
It'd be perfect.
Exactly.
Looks so good.
Yeah, it'll be sick.
I bet it does.
I think that about wraps up in terms of the arc specifically here. I think that wraps up pretty much everything I wanted to touch on. I do like the interludes. All down for a few scenes. What I really like about the interludes is they give us easy extra scenes to throw in. So like maybe not in this episode, but the bit with Parian and the Undersiders, all that whole conversation should still definitely happen. Probably would be in the next episode, that kind of thing. Number Man's a bit more interesting. I don't really know if we do a whole scene for him or not.
I think we cut that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm kind of where I'm leaning. I like the interlude. It's cool, but it's one of those things where like it's so hard because I'm such a sucker for world building, and I'll read a whole book that's just world building. Couldn't get through Game of Thrones. Read through his whatever his world building book is. I don't know what they pull House of the Dragon from. I read through that whole thing in like an afternoon. it's just world building. So I love these chapters are so great, but definitely like on screen they don't work the same way. It's just a lot of information.
Looking forward ahead, the first half of this chapter the first half of this season can be Taylor focused with some branches out, I think, into Defiant and Dragon, and maybe a Parian and the back to the Undersiders, maybe for some. But I think also this would be a great opportunity, and it would require writing us ourselves. But also, I think there's a lot of stuff you could steal that belong to other people that you could replace. We follow Weld and the Irregulars,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean he's leaving and he's essentially doing the hunting with Faultline. I mean
Mm-hmm.
he's not with Faultline technically speaking, but like you could have him make the Irregulars, or you could. I mean, if you wanted to just have him join Faultline's crew with some others, you know, I think
Yeah.
that would be interesting to do, and have them continue the Cauldron hunt, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Where they you know they've gone solo, they're doing their own like PR work and routine, and like I'm automatically thinking of the entire Las Vegas, what is it, Bambina and the Satyr betrayal and stuff like that. I think you
Oh
could do
yeah.
that. Like I realize that's way ahead, but I think you could replace that with them just hunting down, Cauldron, and the fact that they're in on it. Like,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think and again, these are the arcs where my memory of what I read is not that great, so I'm excited to reread them. But like, obviously, you build up to the whole attack uh, on Cauldron and all of that. Like everything there, that's a huge scene with Scion and all of that, and you really want that to feel important. So it's helpful to have scenes that will build to that. So moments like that, I think are very helpful.
yeah, because that's another where you have the two groups doing their thing, and then all of a sudden, they're building, and that they're going to come together at some point, and that is the peak
Hmm.
of the mountain that they've both been coming to from either side.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I had another thought. I realized if we want to shift focus for a second, because last episode we talked a bit about the time skip, and I didn't
Hmm.
have all of my thoughts in order the way I wished I did. And to be honest, I still don't. But I did realize that there's an aspect to the time skip here. I honed in on what about it I don't like, and and about similar time skips. So because like anything, a time skip is a tool in the writer's toolbox in terms of how they can tell the story. But it's when a time skip is only used to jump from one plot point to another, then to me it's where it gets irrelevant. Because otherwise, just put them next to each other. Why the time skip, right? So
Hmm.
if it's from if one character's like, all right, meet back here in next year, and then you get a little caption 1 year later, and then they meet back there. Like
Yeah.
like what's right? What's the point? Unless it's a comedy and it's for a bit, then sure. But I think that's where Worm gets away with it just a bit because it's supposed to be this distant prophecy. But in terms of storytelling, when it happens, it is just all right, we've told the story and now we need to get to the next plot point in 2 years. So here we go. And then it jumps to it. Um, so that's the one thing I'm worried about uh, not landing very well and figuring out how we're going to want to cross that bridge.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, once again, if I think if Wildbow had not just and this is all, if it was timed better, I'm not even going to say paced. I think if that he knew, okay, in 2 years, I need to write the end of this story, you know,
Mm-hmm.
then then he would have plotted appropriately the end of the world and yada yada yada. Like
Mm-hmm.
he would have said 1 year, um, he would have, or he would have said 2 years, but he made things skip more. Uh, I also just realized he's just bad with time. because he does a time skip in one of his other stories, and it's weird. And he loves moving really fast, which we complain about endlessly. And I think Worm is a great story to take place over 2 years total. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think Worm would have been a great, we follow Taylor's life from 16 to 18. I think that would have been a great following. But yeah.
And you know what? Like, you can kind of do that. I mean, we've joked on both podcasts. We've joked about how short a time frame all of this is happening in. Like from Fight with Lung on the rooftop to Echidna is like, does it even get through the summer? It's April
no.
to
We already said it's like 2, and I think by the time we finish Echidna, it's like 2 months, 2 weeks. Like,
yeah.
maybe.
It's so quick. And like, to be
Like
totally
her
honest,
first, with the exception without Amy, anybody who broke a bone would not have healed yet.
right? Yeah, exactly. And like, we've joked about it because it feels very quick, because it is very quick, but it also doesn't read like, when you're reading a story like that, you're not expecting that to be the case. You're naturally buffering in time for stuff. So like, in my mind, Lung to Echidna is like a year. And just in the way this all paces out, it's so much is going on. I'm just internally giving like a year for all of this to happen, and like, it would be very easy to just casually throw out how much time has passed in a newspaper or something like that. You could easily drop that into conversation somewhere, and just, if you just gave them more time, the audience would buy it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be as quick as it's happening now. So you could easily do that. You could easily spread out the whole story to cover in the time jump. And then if you did want to do smaller time jumps just to, illustrate development, like, for example, Taylor going and joining the wards, and then jump a month down the line, right? And she's fully involved there. Things like that. Smaller time jumps are easier to sell at that point, because now you're trying to establish that time has passed.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we've said it before. I think that we time this correctly with the story and with the natural gaps in the seasons to make them appropriate to how long it feels for the audience. Obviously it's going to be like a month, or not a month, like a year at least between seasons. But the audience can be like, oh yeah, a couple of months have passed in the story. Like, I get that. And
Right.
really do just, we don't, honestly, we don't say how much time has passed. Number one, leave it ambiguous. People can guess. And number two, you just make sure that by the end you go, welp, it's been 2 years. Like,
right.
I think that's
Well, here
good
we
enough.
are. World's ending.
Like, for
Yeah.
real, if they didn't say how long things took, I would assume that there's like a week gap between some arcs. Like,
Yeah.
I would assume like a week gap between some arcs, a week gap between some chapters. I would assume there's a month gap between some arcs. Like,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, and again, this all goes without saying too, that like, we can also adjust the prophecy, right? It might be one of those things where maybe it's easier for us to come back to this at the end, and we've planned out the seasons, we've figured everything out, and then we go, hey, you know what? It would work really well if it's this long after whatever. And then we just go back and change the prophecy to 6 months, or, whatever it is. Or,
Yeah.
just we can adjust that later too, and just come back and make it fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um I got nothing else for this. I mean, I feel like this one's even more straightforward than the last one.
It is a bit, like I said. I think we'll have some words next arc.
For sure.
So
this one just had a nice little layout to it already. Not much to change.
And again, I sound like a broken record, but Wild Bill already wrote it pretty well, and things we like are things going to stay in. And I liked what you said a little bit ago, Alan. Is don't need to make the change if it's not necessary, and don't think it is. Keep it in there, keep it going. Yeah. So kind of a little reminiscent of our very first episodes. We were like, this is episode 1. There we go, and arc 2. I think that's episode 2. There we go. Just kind of flowing right along. Sometimes it just sort of falls in line, and we love it.
Yeah, I think this will just be a matter of if we really do want to pad out, some other a B plot for these, we just need to figure it out and make it fit with the tone.
Yeah, and that's something that is actually a good point that I do think would be worth. We keep saying we're going to go back and do it, and we never do. It'd be worth it to do an episode or two where we do sort of really just focus in on some of these B plots that we really like expanding Weld's character, not Flechette, Fault Line, Cauldron. A couple of these things, and really start to try to space them out. They don't need to be in every episode, right? But just hey, what's the arc for the season for this character? And sort of just making sure that we do dot them in where it's appropriate. Probably be a good idea to kind of take a look at that in a future episode.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's one of those things I think, like you said, we'll just retrospectively, we'll have to sit and talk and look at these.
Yeah. Be a good idea. On that note, unless you got anything else, I think we'll wrap it up here.
Good work, gentlemen.
Nope.
Yeah. You listen, we've hit them with enough 2.5, 3 hour episodes. Give you all a little break.
Plenty of content.
Plenty of content. Special thanks to all of our Patreon subscribers. Truly means the world to us. We got some exclusive videos for our Patreon members. For those of you who are not members, we do have some exclusive videos over there. So if that sounds fun, drop by, give it a listen. We appreciate it. And stick around. Arc 22 coming up for Brockton Bay Book Club next week.
Ooh.
And then, of course, Dissecting Worm the week following that. That is going to be a fun one. It is a great arc for those who know what's coming. A lot of fun stuff there. So
I'm so
until
excited.
then,
I'm going to read it right after this.
No, I'm only a few chapters into the reread here, and it's already all coming back to me. So it's going to be fun. Well, Alan, thanks for joining me. Michael, thanks for joining and making us sound so pretty. And until next time, to the rest of you, take that, you worms.
Thank you so much for listening. Read along with us at parahumans.wordpress.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you love? What did you hate? Anything you think we missed, etc., as long as it's kind. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find us on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit at Brocktonbaybc, or click the link in the description.